middle powers must act together because if we're not at the table, we're on the menu.
Somewhere Europe has to grow out of the mindset that Europe's problems are the world's problems, but the world's problems are not Europe's problems.
चुन चुन करके हिसाब लेना ये मेरी फितरत है.
Why should it be a problem? If I'm smart enough to have multiple options, you should be admiring me.
भारत झुकने वाला भी नहीं.
The rise of India will be determined by India. It will be determined by our strength, not by the mistakes of others.
The old order is not coming back. We shouldn't mourn it. Nostalgia is not a strategy.
Hey guys, welcome to my channel. In this video, we are going to talk about how BRICS is adapting to the decline of the Western order. Now, if you enjoy deep analysis on the global order shift, trade, energy, and changing world order, make sure to like and subscribe. Now, why we are talking about BRICS here though? See, because this is no longer just a story about the decline of the Western order in abstract. This is a story about who is actually sitting inside the zone of disruption and who is outside of it. For example, let's look at it. The Russia-Ukraine war already, what it did, it fractured the global supply chains, disrupted energy flows, and exposed the limits of sanctions as a tool of control. Russian oil just did not disappear. What happened? It found the new destination. Trade did not stop. It again found new customers. The system bent, rerouted, and adjusted, right? And now Middle East is burning, right? Iran is what? Iran is central to the crisis. Gulf is central to the global energy. Shipping risk is rising. Insurance risk is rising. Trade routes are under pressure. And the countries most exposed to this instability are not random states on the sidelines. Or are they? Think about it. They are BRICS countries. BRICS partners are countries moving closer to that wider BRICS-centered space. Let me rehash it for you again, okay? Russia is directly involved. Iran is directly involved. UAE and Saudi Arabia sit inside the energy geography of the crisis. India and China depend on these flows. And much of the Asia feels the downstream shock through energy shipping and supply chains. So BRICS is used in this video for a very simple reason. That block is not watching the chaos from outside. Actually, it is living inside it, absorbing the pressure and trying to adapt in real time. So whatever is going on, okay, how the Western order actually manipulated the system through sanctions, dollar dominance, energy and trade control, and all that. Now it's the time, it's time for BRICS to adapt to it and find new ways to establish itself. Right? And this is why this video matters, because when the countries inside the disruption are also the countries building new payment systems, new energy routes, new diplomatic alignments, new trade mechanisms, then BRICS stops being just a talking club. It becomes what? It becomes one of the main platforms through which non-Western world is trying to survive and reorganize under pressure. And that is the real subject of this video. That how is BRICS adapting precisely because of many of its own members and aligned powers are at the center of the crisis that is reshaping the global system. I mean, we're talking about a complete disruption in the rule-based international order. So let's get started, guys. Please do like and subscribe, and let's get started. Let's get going. Now, how we are going to actually move through this video is that we will first of all understand the enforcement architecture of the Western order, and then we will go through each and every uh, mechanism and how BRICS is adapting to it. Okay, and that's how we will try to understand uh, what is the game plan here, where BRICS is headed, where the whole entire order, the new world order, is headed. Okay. Now let me actually share my screen if I haven't done that already. So my screen is right here. Okay. So the enforcement architecture under strain. So, to understand this, the enforcement architecture of the Western order, what exactly is it? To understand what is changing today, we first need to understand how the Western order actually functions. After World War II, United States and its allies built a global system that linked finance, trade, energy, and security. The dollar became the dominant global settlement currency. Energy markets are largely priced in dollars. 95% of the invoicing is done in dollar. Western financial institutions controlled much of the world's banking networks, maritime insurance markets, and financial clearing houses or clearing systems. Now, I'll give you something in perspective, okay, just so that you understand where I'm going with this. How much of a daunting task this whole thing is, and this is especially for the de-dollarization lobby, that always says the whole chaos we are seeing is because de-dollarization is happening, so blah blah blah, whatever, right? But the reality is this, guys, okay? There are 11,000 plus institutions. There are 11,000 plus institutions linked to the SWIFT network. Okay? SWIFT. We all know what SWIFT is, right? Now, compared to that, if you look into it, then you find that China CIPS has only China's CIPS has only 1,500 institutions linked to it. What are those institutions? Institutions as in banks, businesses, trades, commerce. Because all these institutions that are linked, that actually are going to do the business, and how many of them actually pass through that payment system. So when somebody tells me that there is de-dollarization going on, something major going on, then right there is your number. That 11,000 as compared to 1,500. Meaning, I would say that, yeah, there is some de-dollarization happening if you combine all the institutions that are there. Okay, if you combine all the BRICS countries and their payment systems and the association through their payment system, the linking of those institutions, even that combined is not equal to 11,000. All right. So that's how much of a daunting task this whole thing is. All right. So so let's come back to the subject here. The Western financial institution, what they did, I talked about that, right? So the architecture gave the Western order basically what? The powerful enforcement tools. And countries that actually challenge the system, they could face what? Financial sanctions, asset freezes, banking exclusion, trade restrictions, then diplomatic isolations. Now, you have seen all these terms that I'm talking about here, right? These terms that I'm talking about here in this video right now. You have seen all that live in real time in case of Russia. Russia was the prime example uh, of this whole thing. Financial sanctions. Russia has all the financial sanctions. Asset freezes. We know what happened. Banking exclusions, Russians were completely excluded from all the Western banking system, especially anything that was linked to SWIFT. Trade restrictions. Remember, there were Indian companies that were trading with Russia and providing them chips, the semiconductor chips and all that. Those companies were actually sanctioned. That what is that? That is basically the trade restriction. Russians don't receive any NVIDIA GPUs. Do you know this? You didn't know this. Russians don't receive that. Whatever AI based work they have done because they bought lots and lots of NVIDIA GPUs prior to the sanctions. That's what actually created even a supply chain problem when it came to NVIDIA GPU back in 2022. If you don't remember that, you go buy GeForce RTX 3090. That in those days 3090 was $2,000. Then diplomatic isolation. If you remember, then the attempt was that Western countries they wanted to isolate Russia. Remember that? So all these things that I'm talking about here, Russia was the prime example. I would say Russia was in fact more like a guinea pig. If you think that Russia is the only one, let's talk about Cuba. Look at what happened to Cuba. Now, nobody, actually, even to this day, nobody knows why Cuba is under sanction. What harm could Cuba do to the United States of America that Cuba has been sanctioned for such a long time? Or what harm can Venezuela do to the United States that it has been sanctioned for a long time? Right? It's just nothing. It's just the enforcement of the power, the enforcement of the rule based international order. What was that rule based international order? I have made a detailed video on it. Okay. And I have made detailed video on it, and I will actually post the link in this video, like probably at the top or somewhere. Okay. So you go check it out. You go check it out. The rule based international, what exactly that is and how that works. Okay. So, so so that's how the whole enforcement structure was. So why I'm talking about the enforcement structure, I'm talking about enforcement instruction is because what I'm going to talk about is the adaptation, how actually BRICS is adapting to this whole thing, and how BRICS is adapting to the energy crisis that's going to happen, right? So we are going to talk about all that in this video, right? So now, first of all, let's talk about the sanctions pressure and the BRICS response. So sanctions pressure, what happened with the sanctions? What's wrong with the sanctions? Sanctions have long been used or have been one of the most powerful geopolitical tools of the Western order. Now, there's one thing I want to actually clarify about sanctions, though. Okay, that the US or the Western order, mm, yes, I just forget to click the wrong button. Anyways, so so sanctions these. In fact, I think that even the Western countries, the countries that actually talk about sanctions, the politicians that are here, even they don't understand what sanction really is and how actually there is a blowback when you apply sanction on a country. These sanctions, the one thing about sanction is this. Okay, one thing about sanction that everyone needs to understand is that sanctions are directly related to the dollar recycling. Some of you be like, what? Dollar recycling? What am I talking about? Yes, I'm going to make a video about dollar recycling as well. But in nutshell, just understand that when dollar is printed in the US, it goes to the global market through various means. Then the global market basically does transactions, buys oil, sells things and this and that. Then lots of that money actually gets invested into the treasury bonds, US security, US stock markets, and all that. Basically, all that money gets invested into the US. And this whole entire cycle from printing the money to pushing the money into the global market and back into the US system is called one cycle. The whole process is called dollar recycling. All right. Now, so what these politicians don't understand is that when you apply sanction on a economy or on a country, then you are actually hurting your own economy. And that's one of the primary reasons why uh, even the US prints the dollar and is still they print the dollar, but it's still the dollar gets devalued over the period of time. Dollar has lost 95% of its value. And then some of you will be like, so how it is surviving? It is surviving because the global economy is also suffering with that too. Why? Because global economy uses it. But what you could buy for $1 20 years ago, you cannot buy for that the same item and in the same quantity today. Like for example, you could buy in 98, 99, you could buy a gallon of oil for $1, but today it is what 339. That's for the same gallon, 339 per gallon. So there is a big difference, right? So so let's again go back to it. Okay, now so most what happens here is this. I lost my chain of thought. Okay, now by cutting countries off from the global financial systems, right, sanctioning states could apply enormous economic pressure. And this is why I was saying that uh, when you cut somebody's access from the global financial system, then you are actually shrinking that whole radius of dollar recycling. So consider the dollar recycling radius as something. Okay, let me actually open my pen and then I will explain you in better. Okay, this needs to be understood really well, then you will understand what I'm talking about. All right, and how this whole entire mechanism is. So let's say dollar recycling at first is this. Okay, when nobody is sanctioned. Okay, then when you sanction, let's all these countries, for example, right, these are all countries. Now when you remove one of these countries, let's say this country gets removed, then what happens is that this dollar recycling radius is this. Why? Because now you are recycling less dollar. You already removed this country that probably could have been recycling $1 trillion to $2 trillion per year through their institutions and whatnot. Now you have removed it. What's happening now? The global dollar is getting it is shrinking. They by $2 trillion. That is from that country, right? So that's what happens, and this shrinking happens over the period of time like this, and this circle becomes smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller like that. What does that mean for us then? It simply means for us is that when this circle becomes smaller, then you can do less borrowing, meaning that in your own global in your market, less money is coming from outside into your market, meaning that less FDI is coming to your market, meaning that you cannot do anything, any development, any kind of thing, good things about for your country, actually, even if you wanted to. That leads to what? That leads to bad economy, right? So how BRICS is countering this thing? BRICS is countering this thing by trading in national currencies. So when you do this dollar recycling, why I explained you dollar recycling is because when you apply the sanctions on small countries, okay, small economies like Cuba or Venezuela or something, then it's fine. Then it works out. Okay, yeah, fine. Hmm. or a small country like Zambia or Namibia or something like that, you apply sanctions on them and feel good about it, do chest thumping and all that. We are this, we are that, we are the most powerful country, blah, blah, all the good stuff you do. But the moment you apply a sanction on a major power like Russia that is probably recycling almost $7 to $8 trillion a year. I mean, Russia's GDP is $2.5 trillion or something like that. But that's just the GDP. Just to reach $2.5 trillion of GDP, Russia has to probably process almost $5 trillion annually or recycle almost $5 to $6 trillion annually just to maintain that $2.5 trillion GDP. And not to mention the influence of that into the global market with other countries and all that too. So I'm combining all that, and then I'm saying that when you sanction a country like Russia, you are simply shrinking your radius little too much. So instead of 6 to 7 trillion, those $6 to $7 trillion that were getting recycled each year, that is basically now offloaded from the market. Meaning US cannot print those $6 to $7 trillion if they wanted to. Now, if they will print those $6 to $7 trillion, what will happen? Currency will devalue. Currency will devalue, which means that the US government will have to do something to manage that. How they're going to manage that? They're going to manage that by adding inflation. Sometimes inflation is in terms of price increase, sometimes it is through tariffs, sometimes something, sometimes higher taxes. But that's how it is managed. Okay. Now, coming back to the point again. So, when sanctions were applied, what BRICS did? Russia started to sell its oil and everything else to India, China, Iran in the national currencies. They established their payment system, they established their settlement systems and all that, and they started to trade in national currencies. Now, 95% of the trade between India and Russia is in national currencies. Russia and China is in national currencies. Trade between actually India and China has grown to $150 billion. And Russia and Russia and India are going to increase their trade furthermore to $100 billion. They're just working on it. Just recently, a statement came out. So that's how they're handling the sanctions pressure. By doing what? By creating the alternative shippings, new intermediaries, non-Western settlements. And these are the systems that now absorb the shock. Now, another interesting thing about sanction is this too. Why sanctions are failing? Look at what's happening in the Middle East. What happened? Before the whole Middle East debacle happened, US was saying that India shouldn't be buying sanctioned Russian oil. India made a very fair point that, hey, you asked us to buy the Russian oil because we had to stabilize the market. You asked us to do that. You asked for our help. Biden administration asked for India's help. So Trump administration was little too cocky and they did not realize the gravity of the situation. And guess what happened? Finally, now they're back on track. Yeah, you continue to buy. We are giving them. I mean, that whole arrogance doesn't go away. Right? So, anyways, then and then look at Iran. Now situation is so bad that they have de-sanctioned the Iranian oil too. So now Iranian oil is actually flowing into the market as well, just to stabilize the market. Why? Because it has domestic impact. Domestic impact where? In the United States. And midterm is near, so they have to do what they have to do. Now at this point, there is no national security threat or anything. Now you see the game, how that game is backfiring, right? And that's how BRICS is handling it. What happened here? Okay. India's Prime Minister Modi talked to Iranian president and they sorted this thing out. And you have to understand this, that Iran actually, buys India's food and all that. Okay, India supplies food and grain, water, all these things to Iran. Has been supplying all these things to Iran during the whole sanction time frame. People may say lots of things. Lots of people who don't even know the reality of it, but food and water has been supplied by India to Iran. Okay, Iran is allowing Indian ships to pass through the Strait of Hormuz for this reason. It's not because they like the looks of it. All right. And that's another thing. That's what BRICS members do. They don't leave each other behind. They work through it. So that's what's happening. Okay. Now, now let's get to the second point. Okay. Second point is energy trade adaptation. This is very important, right? What happened in the energy trade adaptation? Energy is basically, it's like it sits at the center of geopolitical power. Everything, especially in the fourth industrial revolution. And for decades also, if you look into it, the Western order maintained what? Enormous influence over global energy markets. Through what? Through financial control, trading networks, and maritime infrastructure. These are the three main things, okay? But the recent restructuring of global energy trade, it shows that how countries are adapting to a changing system, especially the BRICS countries. Russia has what? Russia has redirected large portions of its oil exports toward the Asian market. After the Middle East, what happened? Russia said that they are not going to sell anything to the Europe. At first, because Europe was talking all the smack, right? Europeans were like, "Oh, we are going to make sure that we are not going to buy anything from Russia and this and that." Hey, fair enough. Don't buy anything. At least have a backup plan. These people, they want to get into fourth industrial revolution. I don't know how they're going to manage all that. So Russians said that, okay, that's fine. We are not going to supply anything to Europe. We are moving to east. Russia pivoted from west to east. Now they are going to supply everything to the friendly countries. Who are the friendly countries? Tell me that. Those friendly countries are the BRICS countries. Those are the countries that are friendly countries at this point. Okay. So, uh, one of the friendly countries is who? India. India has actually increased the oil import from Russia now. They are working to actually increase this cooperation even further. Why? Because India is saying that we are not going to fall for this whole nonsense that is going on in the Middle East. And I had said this thing in one of the videos too in the past, where I made this video on why India will not stop buying Russian oil. And I explained that whole politics of it through the numbers. I explained the calculation. I explained how the oil and everything, oil market works. I explained all that. And then I explained why India will not buy it, why India will not stop buying it. And one of those things that I said in that video was that President Trump actually said in 2016, he asked India not to buy oil from Iran, to stop buying oil from Iran. At that time, PM Modi had good relationship with President Trump, so he was like, okay, let's oblige him and let's see. And he let it go, and he just stopped buying oil from Iran. India stopped buying oil from Iran. And then it's like the demand actually, it goes up and up and up without even thinking about anything. These people, they only think about their own agenda, that somehow somebody else needs to listen to their BS and just follow through. India said that, get out of here. 2016, 2018, we actually listened to you and we paid the price for it. India said that they paid the price for it. So they decided that no more of listening to somebody who has no clue what they're talking about. So they continued to buy it. Right? Now, So, so how BRICS is adapting to this whole energy demand? Right now, what's happening is that the supply chain is shifting. Okay, supply chain is shifting. How? India hasn't said anything that India is going to mainly buy it from US or something, but India has said that India has increased its natural gas purchase from 27 countries to 40 countries. That's what India is doing. That natural gas import India is doing from 40 countries. And India has signed the deal with Canada as well. India purchased a little bit from US, but India is going to, chances are that India is going to increase that natural gas purchase from Russia even more so. Okay. So that's how, and it's the same thing. China is doing the same thing. And there is a scenario that is building that Russia, India, and China may actually start working together to probably come up with a supply chain or a pipeline via China, Russia, through China, through India, and then all over the place in the Asian continent, so that uh, there is a rock solid supply chain for everyone. There is talk of that as well. So let's see how that pans out. But at the end of the day, BRICS is doing things that they need to do. Okay. Now let's move to the next one: financial adaptation and the BRICS CBDC vision. Okay. Now, what exactly is going on here? At the end of the day, when we do trade, supply chain, business, this, that, everything is all about what? It's all about GDP. It's all about financial sovereignty. It's about financial control, right? So, financial control has historically been one of the strongest pillars of the Western order, and this has been one of the strongest pillars of the Eastern order, too. So, for those who don't know, I will tell you that there was a time, okay, there was a time, let me hide this first. There was a time when uh, India controlled almost 35%, 35 to 40% of the global economy, contributed to 40% of the global economy. Then it shrunk, that thing shrunk to 25% during the Islamic invasion and all that, when the Islamists were actually ruling India. Okay. Then, and China was around 50%. And then slowly and slowly, the whole thing shifted through industrial revolutions into the towards the west, which was actually not shifted, but it was actually forced to shift towards the west, and it was forced to shift. That's why it collapsed to that pretty soon. It didn't last longer. When if you look into the Eastern Order actually lasted for almost 2 to 3,000 years compared to the Western Order that lasted give take 200 years. That's it. That's the robustness of the Eastern Order. Okay. Now, coming back to the thing. So, the global dominance, okay, global dominance of the dollar gives Western institutions what? Enormous influence over international transactions. Through financial sanctions, asset freezes, and transaction monitoring, the system can exert powerful leverage, right? Now, let me actually share my slide real quick. So, now, the BRICS countries, what they're doing to counter all this, the whole the financial blockade, right? The asset free sanctions. In fact, what's happening is that BRICS countries they have increasingly begun exploring ways to diversify their financial settlement systems. And I have actually in the past, in my videos, I have said that there are two things that will replace the existing financial systems. For West, it will be stablecoin, and for the East, it will be CBDCs. Why is that? Because I'm gonna get back to the slide again, okay? Because West cares about nobody controls their system. At least their citizens care that government should not touch their finances. No debagging, no government should come and just simply debank you because they don't like you or because you didn't vote for them, right? And that's why they prefer stable coins, because they are all crypto and it's centralized, decentralized, okay? Whereas Eastern governments, they don't do this type of stuff, okay? So that's why they prefer to control their their legal tender through a central system where they control that money. That is a centralized system, that is CBDCs. That's why they prefer CBDCs, because they want to have certain level of control, okay? So how BRICS is countering that thing? Number one is local currency settlements, bypassing dollar of for bilateral trade. Chinese yuan is growing shares of BRICS cross-border transactions. That is, yuan is there. Then India's rupee is also there. Then ruble is also gaining traction. Okay. Now you have to understand this. The what Iran has done is this. Iran has simply started to charge money to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. Iran is saying that you have to make the payment in yuan, Chinese yuan, in order to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. You just cannot go without paying the fees, just like Egypt was doing in the Suez Canal. But then Suez Canal's architecture is completely different, whereas this is more like security fees, that Iran has come up with its own security architecture, that okay, if you don't, then we will just simply blow your shit up. That's it. And then one of the most important things that BRICS has done is the new development bank. Okay. And then there are many other things that I have talked about in my BRICS videos and all that too. But one of the most important thing that just happened recently is the CBDC play. Under India's BRICS presidency, discussions have advanced on linking nations' central bank digital currency rails. What does that mean? It means that payments move central bank to central bank. BRICS, all these BRICS central bank CBDCs will be interconnected. They will be linked together. So when that happens, what happens is that they will adjust to the exchange rate and all that. And let's say if somebody is from India, they go to China, they will be able to make payment in the rupee, see e-rupee, and it will be, the settlement will be done in Chinese currency, so on and so forth, like that. That is the plan. So it is yet to be seen that how many BRICS countries actually agree to it, even though India and UAE have already linked their CBDCs, their systems. They have already, it's in progress. It's approved from both countries. So that's what they're doing to counter this whole financial adaptation and the financial chaos that's going to happen. Okay. Then institutional adaptation and multipolar diplomacy. So in the institutional adaptation, if you look at it, right, beyond like trade and finance, BRICS is like what they're adapting to it. The grouping is basically is increasingly positioning itself as a platform representing the interests of the global south. They are saying that there should be institutional reforms. What kind of institutional reforms? UNSC reform. They're talking about United Nations Security Council reform. Okay. India leads calls for UNSC restructuring, right? And the membership expansion, they're talking about the bloc has admitted new members, then broadening its geography and economic footprint across Asia, Africa, and Latin America, and all that. So they're saying that okay, we need to increase the membership of UNSC and all too. Then Global South platform, they created BRICS for this reason and this reason only. They created their own institution, BRICS, SCO, and all that, right? Then governance pressure, coordinated calls for the reform of IMF, World Bank, WTO, voting rights to reflect actual GDP contributors. So if you look into it, that these IMF, WTO, they're part of the rule-based international order. They don't follow United Nations Charter. They're not part of United Nations, and yet BRICS countries are saying that yeah, it's a good institution, just implemented in a wrong way. So uh, let's figure a way out to fix all this rather than we try to replace it or something. And if they don't listen, then we will just replace it. What's the big deal, right? So that's the whole idea behind BRICS mentality. Okay. So the next one is nothing. So the verdict is this. The verdict is that uh, sanction still bites, but BRICS says I think it's safe to say at this point that uh, BRICS countries have learned to adapt to sanctions. They know how to handle it, and now, okay. Then energy flow that is being rerouted permanently. What's happening is that there is Vladivostok Chennai corridor. There are trade corridors, INSTC, and all through Iran, but that is disrupted right now. And then they're working through Arctic as well. So I think that this whole Middle East war is going to actually uh, speed up the uh, Arctic trade corridor work. Okay, it's gonna pace it. It's gonna make it faster. Then financial settlement is diversifying slowly but certainly. And I think as that grows, as the BRICS major economies start to contribute, work together. So far, there are talks. One or two countries are working together, but like for example, there is no national currency trade between India and China. There is $150 billion trade, but they don't trade in their national currencies with each other because China has its own problems. China doesn't want to leave its claim on the territories that they are necessarily create claim that that's theirs or whatnot. But and so all those things, they create problems, right? So Chinese don't want to let it go, and India is saying that, well, then don't, so be it. We'll do everything and anything to make sure that you don't go anywhere either. So that's a whole different discussion. India China relationship complication is so bad that it requires its own dedicated study. In fact, you can create your own YouTube channel on it and continue making videos on that. Okay. And then you have multipolarity. Multipolarity, at first there was a bipolar world, then unipolar world. Actually, no, let me fix it. Sorry, I will rephrase it. Okay. At first, at the beginning of time, there was a multipolar world. There was a multipolar world. Then briefly, for 200 years, I would say, came again, it came unipolar world. It became unipolar. Okay. Why? Because it was mainly British colonies all over. Okay. Then Ottoman Empire was in the Europe and in those areas. But I wouldn't consider a pole or whatever. But then what happened? World War I came. That unipolarity and with tinge of uh, bipolarity, I would say, was there, but it was gone. By World War II, world again became what? Bipolar. Multipolar, brief unipolar, then again bipolar, then again brief unipolar. Hmm? And then again, it's headed towards what? The multipolar. And so, if you understand this properly, if you look into it, you find that the longest serving system that has successfully worked in the world has been the multipolar world. And that's what BRICS is adapting to, and that's what BRICS is headed towards. BRICS is saying the multipolar world with multilateralism. What does that mean? Multipolar world actually is related to the power, the centers of powers. Like for example, right now, there are four major powers in the world, okay? And then there are middle powers and the regional powers like that. That's the architecture, the hierarchy. four major powers: India, China, Russia, and United States. And then you have uh, middle power Europe, maybe Canada, or below that Canada could, I don't know if Canada is even a regional power, because United States is the regional power in that region too. So but overall, if you look into it, then Canada also falls there. But Europe is the middle power, right? So on and so forth. That's how. And Iran, for example, Iran is another middle power in the Middle East. So that's how the power centers are right now. Okay. And multipolarity is related to the power. But multilateralism is related to the institutions that are used by powers to enforce the rules of law around the globe. Okay. So that's why the rule based international order introduced what? World Trade Organization, IMF, mm, and there are one or two things more. But then United Nations introduced what? There are many other institutions. Those were all multilateral institutions, right? And so what BRICS did? BRICS said, let's go with multilateral bank. That is what? NDB. NDB was created as a substitute for what? IMF and World Bank. Asian Development Bank was created for the same purpose. Then, as far as trade framework is concerned, BRICS is actually going through simple things. By trade framework they're creating, BRICS trade framework they're working on, and that's something that that is in works. Okay, it's not completely decided, but it's in works. So it will come, and what will that do? It will replace WTO. Not replace, but more so, like I would say, alternatives rather than anything else. Because the way things are going, it seems like that you never know when there will be chaos somewhere. It's best to have alternatives, so that uh, uh, until the peace is restored again, um, got to work through the whole entire thing through alternatives. That's what the whole idea is. Okay, and that's how BRICS is adapting. So this is it for this video, guys. I hope you liked the video. I hope you learned something. Please do like and subscribe, and I will talk to you guys in another video. Take care.